Shall we just go ahead?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Hubley-Patterson, and I've been with Ottawa for a number of years. I joined in 2007, and Garth Smith and I are co-presenting tonight's little session here on online netiquette. Andrea and Karen asked us if we would please put this presentation together for you. We would like this to be very interactive because we're not sure if all of you feel that we've got an issue in this area with regard to online etiquette. So we're going to be very curious to hear your thoughts and see what you have to say about this. Let's see, Karen, would you be able to go forward to the next slide? Okay, there we go. This is our agenda for this evening. Garth will introduce himself as well. We would like to just review with you the rules of netiquette that are posted in our online courses at Ottawa. I'm not sure if you've taken the time to look at those recently, but we would like to review those. Talk a little bit about what we call the golden rule of netiquette. Email netiquette, maybe address some root causes of poor netiquette, talk about the role of the instructor, and then Q&A, personal experiences. However, please do feel free to comment during the presentation if something comes to mind on a certain topic and you'd like to jump in and share a story with us. That would be great. Karen, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, Garth, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Allison. Yeah, I'm Garth Smith. I've been with Ottawa since before the turn of the century, and that sounds like a long time ago, doesn't it? And I guess the reason it sounds like a long time ago is because it actually is. I was just looking at, students do introductions on the online courses, and in the old days, a student might write something like, the personal interest might be, I like to fish, I like to read science fiction, and I've seen Back to the Future 3 times, something like that. A young student just this first week of class wrote this about what she likes to do in her spare time. She said that some of the hobbies include nail art, dancing, watching anime, cosplay, cosplay, and playing video games. And I'm also in the esports club too. I understand dancing, although I probably don't understand the dancing that she's referring to, but I really am going to have to do some research to find anything at all to understand what it is she likes to do. So that, just in my mind, it showed how times have changed a little bit. Allison was my mentor for online instructing. So as I go through my part of the presentation, please be generous with her and don't judge her ability to work with people based on how you evaluate my presentation. And even prior to that, Karen Bryson was the person who, as she still does, took me through online training. And I've always appreciated her kindness and compassion in getting me through that session. And of course, Andrea Cook has been very kind to give me assignments, and I've appreciated that sort of thing. I do, in addition to teaching, I teach business ethics primarily and some other courses like training and development and management 101. I really enjoy some of the online peer reviewing I've been asked to do. Pardon me. One of the things that's nice about that is I really learn a lot from instructors I'm reviewing. I feel a little bit embarrassed that I'm reviewing people and making comments about how well they're doing because I'm picking up a lot of tips on how to improve my own performance. Having said that, I hope tonight, as Allison said, this can be a very interactive presentation. We don't know how serious some of you think netiquette is, if it's serious at all, but only by hearing what people have to say, experiences they've had with students. I have a couple of stories that I'll share if we have time, but I'd much rather hear you share stories and let us respond to it. So welcome to this evening. I'm glad you're spending the time with us.
Okay, thank you, Karen. I have a very similar background to Garth. As I said, I joined Ottawa in 2007. We both serve on the online Adjunct Faculty Development Committee. We're both peer reviewers. We're both faculty mentors. And it was really interesting to, you know, kind of spin off of what Garth said, is when you are a faculty mentor or a peer reviewer, it's great because we get to go into the other courses and see what the other faculty are experiencing in relation to something like this, Netiquette. So that's really great for us. I primarily teach in the area of healthcare administration and also do an occasional EMBA course for Andrea. Karen, would you like to advance the slide, please? Okay. Garth, do you want to take number 1 on the Netiquette, or should I? Either way. Wanna go ahead?
I'm prompted and prepped to take it, Allison. So,
okay, good.
Let me go through it. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. This sets a framework and a background for us. As Allison said earlier, we can find all of this in within the instructions for instructors. So, but it does give us a frame of reference to start from. The first point seems reasonable. The following guidelines outline expectations regarding courtesy in our interactions with one another. Maintain a professional and respectful tone in all postings. That seems to make sense. Avoid language that's ambiguous or may easily be misinterpreted. I think that's really an important one. Sometimes, particularly people with advanced educations, feel the need to let folks know how many syllables they can share in the words they use. And when I was working in the health insurance business in a managed care environment, when we would bid on a business with the state of Missouri, for example, or the state of Kansas, the instructions said that we should write the proposals in 5th or 6th grade language. Some of the people that were writing those proposals moaned and groaned about and said, that doesn't seem right. My personal perspective was, man, this is great. I can understand what people are saying. So I can't overemphasize the importance of writing simple, easy to read sentences. Refrain from responding to posts that you find off-putting. Choose instead to respond to another learner whose post has given you something productive to think about. You know, that's probably pretty good advice, but as we move into the discussion this evening, we should give some thought about the first sentence in this bullet about refrain from responding to posts you find off-putting. At some point, we may bear some accountability as instructors to engage with people who are saying things that we find are offensive. That's it, Allison.
Okay, could you advance the slide, please, Karen? Okay, so continuing on what you can find in your course shell under our Netiquette requirements, use humor cautiously. I would definitely agree with this. Remember that you do not have the benefit of body language and voice inflection to help your co-communicator understand the real intent of your expression. And certainly we know that what one student might find to be humorous, another student may not find it so funny. So I think that's very important. Remember the bulletin board nature of the discussion board, anything posted in the public domain and can be viewed and read by everyone in the class. Personal comments intended for one individual should be sent or emailed directly to that individual rather than posted on the discussion board. And again, I think it depends on, you know, what exactly it is that we're talking about there. Okay, would you like to advance the slide, please, Karen? Oh, I apologize. We thought we corrected this. You're seeing probably a text on top of text. I'm not sure why that's showing up like that. We've checked it a couple of times.
That's my fault. I uploaded this one. It's
that's quite all right, Karen.
Because I didn't get Andrea's right away. So
got it. you're not missing anything here. The title just says the golden rule of Netiquette. And then all I wanted you to get from this is just kind of sort of our golden rule that, you know, we try to live by. Do not do or say online what you would not do or say offline. Treat others as you want to be treated. I don't know what the personal experience has been for all of you, but occasionally I'll get maybe an email from a student, and I sometimes wonder if they would say that same thing to me if they were standing in front of me face to face. And I try to caution the students. I've actually posted some announcements about this to please be, you know, very aware of that. I think sometimes they tend to kind of hide behind the computer interface. But I don't know. Would anybody like to comment on that? Do you see that as being an issue that we have at Ottawa? Anybody?
Hey, Allison, I'll
Yes.
comment on it just a minute. And
Okay.
I've had, when I first started at Ottawa, I was really green and I always over prepared. In fact, sometimes I still do, but it was a little bit more noticeable when you're doing face-to-face classes, because I'd made copies and copies of cases I thought were really cool and interesting and shared them with the classes. And remember, in face-to-face classes, you're sitting for 3 or 4 hours. And one of the challenges you face is if you're trying to honor the requirement of the university that you spend the full 3 or 4 hours with students. Some other instructors didn't do that. And my class would see other students leaving after about 2 hours from other classes and say, hey, what's going on, Garth? How come we're still sitting here? And the other thing they would say is, and sometimes they would roll their eyes when they said it, what is it that we have to be prepared for? It's sort of neat that you gave us all this material. We know it took you some time and a lot of time at the copy machine to do it, but are we responsible for it? And my only point is, if you're in a face-to-face class and they're given body language that shows they think you're a little bit misguided, that's harder to engage with. Where online, it's just you, and it's harder for that message they're giving you to come across. So just my perspective from doing it online, or doing it face-to-face initially.
Okay. Great, thanks, Garth. Does anyone else have anything to share? Have you had any experience like this where you have been kind of taken aback a little bit, wondered if the student would say something to you face to face that maybe they put in an email? Any concerns in that area?
Yeah, I'll speak to that. And it's not just really online. It's probably somewhat of a generational thing. Most of the work I did with the undergraduates at the college last year who came to me was educating them on how to communicate to their professors. Because some of the emails they would forward me or the professors would forward me, I'd have to talk to them about how do you properly address somebody. If you would like an accommodation or you would like them to consider something in your favor, this is how you need to speak to somebody of any level of authority. So a lot of educating to our students that we get, and I've not dealt with that yet online as I'm newer to this position, but certainly on the residential campus there in Ottawa, working with students on how to basically be an adult and communicate to other adults is very different than sending them a text or saying, hey dude, or hey prof, you know, I got this going on, I'm not going to make it. That's not really going to fly when we get out into the real world. And so let's prepare how we deal with that with our college professors.
I would also,
Excellent. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Barbara. Yeah, go ahead.
so I just wanted to echo what was being said is that I don't really have much problem with Ottawa students. I'm doing a lot in the EMBA, but I'll tell you one story that happened to totally online. And I had a student was in the first week, and she decided she was going to take over the class. And she would just start talking to the class like she was the instructor. And something happened where she was critiquing me, and I was trying to guide her in a diplomatic way. And she said to the class that was directed to me, "Suck it up, Buttercup."
Oh,
I mean,
no.
I didn't even know. It took my breath away. So I did eventually do a code of conduct violation, but I had to do it in front of the class to help them understand who was in charge and still be a diplomat. And I did turn that student around, that she ended up earning an A in the class where, I mean, she really put forth the effort and straightened up her act. But here is what I've learned to say. I occasionally will have someone say, hey, you or dude or something. And I go, you know, we're striving for a collegiate atmosphere. And that's where we need to address people in a respectful way. And this is the reason why. When we're discussing sensitive or controversial subjects, we need to have already established a tone of respect that we can disagree, but we're not attacking people. And I said, it'll sneak up on you unexpectedly. So it's important that we establish this up front and keep that decorum. And most will respond to that.
Excellent point. Great comments. Thank you both very much. It's actually a pretty good segue into the next slide that Garth is going to talk about, which is we decided, in addition to just the course shells, to have a little bit of discussion here about email netiquette. Garth, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Before we go through these 4 bullet point or the 4 numbers points, in the management course I finished last term, there was a section in the textbook about netiquette and being polite and how to manage your time, basically. In fact, the title of the section was Controlling Your Office Inbox. And within that section, there were some points. And the first point was turn off notifications so you're not distracted. Don't check email more than 3 times a day. If you need information from a colleague in less than 3 hours, pick up the phone. Respond to simple and urgent messages, file those that don't need a reply, and flag any that require more than any that require more thought, flag them. And then it says empty the email trash at the end of the day. So I wonder how that balances then. I guess we're talking on one hand, if I'm in an office environment, what can I do to make my life easier and simpler and get the work done that my boss is asking me to do and not get caught in the trap of opening one email early in the morning and the rest of the day is nothing but checking my emails. How do I balance that with this, what's on posted for us to look at in questions for consideration? Are people who don't respond to emails being impolite or rude? And let's just think in terms of narrow, let's think in terms of business emails. We probably all have family members who text us, and if you don't respond to them in about 15 minutes, they're really excited and maybe going to jump off a cliff. So, but in a business sense, and we can talk about these if you have some feelings about this, are people who don't respond to emails being impolite or rude? And let's say you send an email, business email, 4 or 5 days go by. Is it rude for people not to respond to you? And then it sort of ties with the second point. What is the acceptable time to respond to an email and be within the norm of proper etiquette? Do you have a feel for that? What, you have a personal guidelines or words of wisdom to those 2 points?
No.
No one has a thought about that. When we're
You-
thinking about, oh, I'm sorry.
This is Glenda. And I guess one of the things that I struggle with is people who do not respond, at least within 24 hours. I would expect that within 24 hours, you would hear something, but then you always know, I mean, if you don't, there may be some, extenuating circumstance, but I usually try to respond to my emails within 24 hours. Some, may come at a time when I'm looking at my phone and I can respond pretty quickly. But what is your thought? Is there a specific time frame that you think that one should be able to be responsive?
Yeah, we're trying to think about what is a reasonable time frame. And I think from an Ottawa perspective, I'm glad you got us on track there. We do ask that we respond within 24 hours, I think, to students. That makes a lot of sense. I try to respond. I look at my emails probably more than a person should, but I don't work a full-time job during the day, and I think that makes a difference. What about this third point? And Mary came in and said she tells students she'll respond to them within 24 hours. I think she said she lets them know in an announcement that what her guideline is for responding to people. What about emails from people depending on who they are? Do you respond more promptly to the boss than to someone who's a subordinate or a peer? Any words of wisdom with that?
Yeah, I typically respond to students. My first priority is any student related issue. Then it's my own people that report to me. And then it's my boss, and then it's just the organization in general. It's kind of how I go.
Okay, and within what time frame do you try to respond?
I try to respond within an hour, but I don't expect anybody else to do that.
If you have someone who, if you respond in an hour and they come back with you with another question, you know, they say we teach people how to treat us.
Yes.
If we condition people that we're very responsive, how do you handle that when you're just simply running out of gas to respond to people?
It just depends. If I have the gas, I'll answer. If I don't have it, then I won't answer it till the next day. But typically I try to get everything answered before I'm done for the day.
Good. I knew a psychiatrist when I was in managed care he was a Florida-based psychiatrist, so I didn't know him personally, but his policy was that, and it wasn't about emails, it was about returning phone calls. At noon, every day from noon to 1, he would take a lunch break, eat a bologna sandwich or a PBJ, and he would return phone calls. And he did that faithfully. It didn't matter what else was going on. He made sure all those calls were returned that day. And if you deal with physicians very often, you know they're busy, and sometimes it can be really frustrating that they don't get back to you. So I thought it was really interesting the fellow had the discipline and a plan to respond in that manner. Do you ever see situations where you send emails to people? And I'm thinking sometimes when I would send emails to my boss, I had a boss who was really interested in what was going on with competitors. So she was really good about sending articles she read about what Magellan is doing, or Aetna, or whoever else, Value Options. Look what these guys are doing. See, isn't this great? And that was fine. It was sort of interesting to hear that. But if you sent her a message and said, we've got to get a request for a proposal finished by the end of the day, do you want me to do this or that? It could often be crickets. But then she would send another message about a great article she read that was very philosophical. Do any of you run into things like that where it's really hard to nail some people down and get them to come into the here and now environment?
Oh my goodness. You know, I am in the managed care environment also. And so I can definitely relate to what you're saying.
Good deal. It is not just me.
Oh, and so
Thank you.
sometimes relating, those informational articles back and saying, this is great. By the way, were you able to see my email that I sent? And I would like to be able to see if you could provide me with a response. Sometimes you have to relay it back, so that people understand that maybe there was something that was missed that you are waiting for a response to.
I hear you. That's a great suggestion. Thank you. Let me see. What this other point about, is it impolite to send emails late at night or on weekends? And in this management course, the textbook I was looking at, there was an example of a company that the boss forbade his people from sending emails to each other at night and on weekends. He said, for our own emotional and psychological well-being, we're not going to do that. And see, people got into big trouble, I guess, if they persisted. Why do some of us send emails at night and on weekends? And maybe are there circumstances where it's okay to do that sort of thing?
Well, I just ran into this with text messages. There was a group that I was a part of that was texting at 4:30 in the morning,
Yeah.
and I just kept hearing the ding go off more and more and more, and really frustrating. And so, emails are a little different because I don't hear the emails come in, and I know that some people are more productive in the early morning of when I'm sleeping. However, text messages, that to me is off limits. Especially late at night or very early in the morning. I don't mind weekends during the day or in the early evening, but certainly anything past 10 or 11 o'clock at night to me is time for people to really kind of wind down and kind of relax for the day.
It sounds like you have too healthy perspective of work and personal life balance, Glenda.
Well, I certainly try, but it doesn't always work like that.
Yeah, I hear you. Let's see, Andrea, you said you agree with Glenda, text messages, no emails. You're saying it's okay to send text messages in the middle of the night, Andrea? Is that your message
No,
to
no,
us?
no, mine was backwards. So I don't know if
Oh.
I text messages. No, I would not agree with sending those early at night or late in the evening or early in the morning, but emails are fine. I mean, we're in the day and age now where everybody pretty much accesses their phone, their email. Sorry, my dogs, but everybody has access to their email constantly on their phone. So sometimes it's just easier for people to grab it and send a quick email at night. And if it's a lot easier not to check that versus text messages. So,
Andrea, if you send it late at night and you send it to me or some others who report to you for assignments, do you have an expectation that they would come back to you before 8 or 9 o'clock the next morning?
Garth, if I send you a text message at midnight, I sure hope you're responding at 12:05.
Well, I would be,
That's
but
my expectation.
I thought,
No.
I wanted to clarify
Absolutely
that.
not. No, please. If you do respond, I'm going to laugh and say, wow, because I get up early in the morning and I work really early in the morning. So if somebody responds, and I actually will send, I have somebody in the office that will respond if I send a 6 a.m. email. I know exactly who it is and I know who will respond. And so I laugh, but no, I don't expect that. Unless it's
Okay.
you, I might expect
All
you.
right.
I think that also now that we've migrated to Outlook, we've got Microsoft Teams IM, and so that's going to be another conversation of when. I mean, I'm cool with students IMing me because it's kind of like texting, except for I don't have to hear it as much. But that's gonna, I think, if we have this same learning thing, a year from now, we might be talking about Microsoft IM. So I don't know. We'll see how that goes too.
Do sometimes some of us want to have it both ways? I can remember a long time ago when pagers were the big thing. And I really took a lot of pride at being interrupted at dinner because I had a pager. It made me feel good. I was important. The organization valued what I had to offer. I've gotten over that. But still, isn't there a sense of being, if the organization needs me 24/7, doggone it, I'm here and I'm available. And on the other hand, we like to complain or commiserate with colleagues about, I can't take this. I need to go to my kids' sports games. I need to go to a piano recital. These guys are bugging me every night and every weekend. And what if I work for an organization that has really challenging customers who expect us to be on call? Should we set boundaries for our employees so they don't have to be taking calls or responding to text messages at 10 or 11 o'clock at night? In the interest of time, let me leave that. And Allison, I'll give it back to you to move to the next slide, I'm thinking. Is that right? About
Yes,
the golden rule?
yeah,
Yeah.
before we talk about root causes, I just had a couple of questions for the group. Karen, Bryson, I think that you and I had a conversation. One of the reasons why we thought it'd be interesting to do this professional development session is we were talking about email, and I'm just curious how many of you get the emails from students that begin, "Hey prof." Does everybody get that?
They're hey you, hey there,
Uh-huh.
or just
uh-huh.
hey.
Does everybody else
And I
get
always
that?
say,
Okay.
my name is not you, my name is not there. You can call me Karen or Dr. Bryson or Dr. B. I give them a wide variety of ways that they can address me, but hey you and hey there are not two of them.
Yeah,
Well,
very
you'll-
good. Now, a couple people are saying no, they don't get that, but Karen and I have both had that quite a bit. So we were curious what all of you were experiencing. Nope, nobody else? Okay. The other question I had for the group is I'm curious with email, if you often receive emails, if you have a written assignment in your online class that is due on day 7, which many of our assignments obviously are, Sunday night at 11:59 Central Time. Do you have emails come in at 10:30 at night asking a question about the assignment that's due? And how do you handle that? Do you post an announcement at the start of the term that says that you're obviously not going to address that till the next day? Give me more lead time. I'm just curious what your practice is. Anybody? No? Garth, what do you do for that?
If a student asks me a question, it's late, the assignment's due Sunday night by 11:59 p.m. and they ask me a question Sunday evening about, I don't understand the assignment. Is that your question,
Well,
Allison?
either understand the assignment, but they don't bother to write to you, yes, until 10:30 at night. The assignment's due at 11:59. Do they turn it in late? Do they manage to figure it out on their own? Do they say, well, I couldn't turn it in because I didn't hear back from you, but they didn't write you until very late? Does that ever happen to you, Garth?
It happens infrequently. A couple of things. I close down by 9 o'clock on Sunday night. And one of the challenges I face with students, I would say it's more with traditional students than more mature students. But the idea, you have to make a certain number of posts to get your 10 or 20 points. So invariably, a handful of students will wait until late Sunday night. And so at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, you'll see a stream of posts and someone will send 3 or 4 follow-up posts, one right after the other. And a couple of things about it. One is clear they haven't given it much thought. They're usually not very lengthy posts. They're just, hey, Ed, nice job. I really agree with you. But the other point I try to make to them is no one else is reading, so you're wasting your time. If you expect someone to learn from what you're having to say, if you had a eureka moment, please have those moments earlier. In some cases, I'm successful in getting students to post their follow-up post earlier in the day on Sunday. But in some cases, I'm not able to do that. But so in answer to your question though, Allison, I'm sorry for digressing. If they ask me, I'm pretty liberal about that. If I read what they have to say, I'll try to respond to the question. My sense about students is that some of them are really struggling emotionally and psychologically. And I'm really sensitive about being too harsh on telling them these are the rules. And I know some instructors do that. And I think it's healthy that students run into those kind of instructors, because when in the work world, you're going to find all kinds of supervisors you're going to have to learn to deal with. But from my own personal perspective, I'm pretty liberal in trying to help them out. And I very rarely penalize students for submitting work late. And I hope I'm not violating Ottawa's tenets, but that's sort of my approach.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Okay, we wanted
Uh,
to talk a little
I
bit.
do
Oh, I'm
want to.
sorry. Go ahead, Wanda.
I do want to respond to that. Because it sets a precedence with students. Sometimes students expect that when they are not penalized or not being held accountable for getting their assignments in on time, then they feel like they have that same flexibility with other, and it carries on, it perpetuates. So we have to really be careful and mindful, of the precedents that might be set there. For instance, I always try to stress to my students that, when you're in that workplace environment, there are going to be certain expectations that is going to be expected of you. When you're given an 8 o'clock time frame to get into work, then your boss is going to expect for you to be there. And so with that, there comes accountability. And so I really think that even in the education world, that accountability starts there. Otherwise, we're going to be constantly, when you kind of are a little too flexible, then it really kind of rears its ugly self in someone else's class, or or on a regular or more frequent basis than it needs to be. So it has to be some extenuating circumstances. And then I always ask students to, if they are able to, and they know of a situations coming up and they're not going to be able to make um, an assignment deadline, let me know in advance, because I really try to stick as much, as close as I can to the policy of Ottawa, because what else do you have to back you up should anything happen, um, is the policy.
Glenda, you're making me feel like wishy-washy Charlie Brown.
Well, I just know that it's happened to me before. And if you
Yeah.
have another student who
Yeah.
is also asking for that flexibility, but may not have any extenuating circumstances, you're at a cross point. What do you do? So
Hey, a question here. CF said, what about the late submission policy? And Mary said she adheres to it. Can someone tell us, remind us, what is the exact late admission policy for Ottawa? Is it flexible or hard line?
Are you talking about the, if an assignment is submitted late, then
Yes.
it's 10% off?
10%.
If it's submitted within 1 week of the original due date?
Yes,
Is that what you're asking?
I am.
Yeah,
Okay.
I usually look at the 10% if it's not.
Heidi asked, should the 11:59 timeframe be modified? What are you thinking, Heidi?
Hi, all. I was thinking maybe to address this issue. I know the initial posts are due on Wednesday.
Right.
Maybe if we stagger them, like the first one stay on Wednesday by 11:59, the first peer post by Friday 11:59, and then maybe Sunday by 5 p.m. Would that help?
Andrea, do you have any thoughts on that? Has that ever been considered, or?
No, Karen, if we've ever talked about that, I mean, I think that's good feedback and something we can definitely take in consideration. But no, I don't know if we've ever discussed that.
It puts a professor in sort of a box, doesn't it? Because if the rule says you have till 11:59 and I'm deducting points because you're sending them in late Sunday night, how do I justify doing that, I suppose?
The only issue I see with making a change like that is Corinne and her team will have a tremendous amount of work updating every class with a new guideline, but I'm just throwing that out there as a consideration.
Yeah, some
That's a
real
good point.
practical
Mhm.
applications.
Okay.
Allison, in the interest of time, do you want to get to your root causes? I'm sort of fascinated to hear that.
Well, actually, when you do the research on this, you don't find a whole lot with regard to the root causes. You find quite a bit of information about with examples of poor netiquette. which we're probably all pretty aware of. But what Garth and I wondered when we were putting the slideshow together is just kind of the way things have changed a little bit with COVID. Does anyone think that COVID has contributed to poor netiquette in any way? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I think it's made everybody much more casual in their communications.
Okay.
But also, as I had posted in the chat, I think that employees are always on this productivity cycle, you know, and their bosses, there's a lot of research out there about their supervisors always monitoring their productivity online to see how long they're online during the day. And they're going after them for times of idle, you know, online activity. So I think they're coming from that environment when they come into the classroom as well. And that's why I think they're emailing and texting at all hours, because they're on that gerbil wheel, I think. And they're in that mentality that I have to show that I'm being productive.
I also think that as a society, we've grown accustomed to, particularly people who are maybe in younger generations, to communicating via text. And that tends to be a lot less formal in the way that people communicate, and using a lot of shorthand and other types of emojis and that type of thing. So I feel like some of that communication that people use in texting has made its way into the classroom. For example, I've noticed a lot more students not capitalizing properly, like the word I, for example, won't be capitalized, or they might not use appropriate punctuation. And I feel like that's coming from the texting culture.
I think Ottawa has a statement in the policies in which they are not a texting environment. So I think that's already in there.
Okay, good. Lisa, you said, yes, I've noticed a huge difference. And then you gave the examples also about hey, you and the lowercase I. Did you have any other examples? Were you saying, yes, you've noticed a huge difference to my question about has COVID contributed to this? Did you have any other examples?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
I've been teaching with Ottawa since I believe the beginning of 2009. And in the beginning, everybody was very professional. I have a lot of new students because I teach a lot of general psychology classes. Just to give a little background about me, I also teach many other courses in psychology. But I have noticed so many more lowercase i's, inappropriate emails, commanding me to change their grades, even though they don't deserve it. And I've even noticed some students, not with Ottawa, but some students have even started using language such as threatening other students in the classroom in their discussion replies. I've noticed students just using inappropriate language. I don't want to get into the words that they're using because they're completely inappropriate, and I do call them out on it, on their feedback, but I always wonder if the students are reading any of the feedback that we all work very hard to provide. So I've started posting the Netiquette as an announcement, because it has gotten so bad for me lately that I've had to address it. And I don't know if they're reading their emails. I don't know if they're reading their announcements. I don't know if they're reading their feedback. It just seems like a lot of my online students think that being fully online, which is the only thing that I teach, is easy, and that they're not going to be held accountable like they would in a classroom. the language that they use would never, ever, ever be accepted in an actual classroom. And so the last question on this slide is this a problem in our online courses? And I would say absolutely. There's just been a huge difference since COVID has hit. And I do my best to try to address it in any way I possibly can, including feedback and announcements and emails. And because it's so easy for us to send an email, we post an announcement, there's a little tiny box that we can click and it goes out as an announcement and an email. But yeah, I think that being trapped in our houses for such a long time has really impacted text messaging, like Heidi mentioned. I also get texts in the middle of the night. So what I've done with that is I have posted the time difference, you know, so that they realize I'm Central Time. When I lived in Hawaii, that was a huge deal because I would get texts at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. So I texted even my Hawaii time zone. I'm back in Oklahoma now, so I'm back on Central Time, but even my Pacific Time people and my Eastern Time people are emailing me at all kinds of crazy hours. And you know, that gets back to some of the other slides that we've talked about, you know, whether or not it's appropriate to email in the evening. And no, we should be winding down. We should be, you know, with our families and doing what we need to do. And I know that some students like waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and doing their work before their day starts and the kids go off to school and they have to go to their full-time jobs. And you know, we're all dealing with a lot of different things in our lives, but I've just noticed those types of differences, Allison.
Oh, I am so sorry to hear this, Lisa. This is just very disheartening. Has anybody else had, to the level that Lisa's described, experienced this? Heidi said there's an entitlement mentality. Glenda, yes, I definitely agree about entitlement. Students are focused on having a 4.0 rather than actually learning. Anybody else have anything to share?
I want to just say in response to Lisa, this is Barbara. Knowing that sometimes they don't read the feedback, I will, in my response, in that thread that's taking place, I'll respond. And then at the bottom, I'll put, this is a teaching moment to the whole class. And then I will address whatever behavior in a way that's saying this is not just to one student, but that we should take this into consideration. And I think the whole thing is the collegiate atmosphere that is created by the words we use. And then I'll just give some examples. And I said, we really strive for a higher standard.
Hey, Barbara, thanks for that. For those who don't know, I'm the academic dean. And so, Lisa, if anything like that goes on at Ottawa or any professor feels uncomfortable with the conversations that are happening, if they feel like there's threatening things being said, you need to bring that to my attention. And that's something your academic dean will look at and can handle for you. I don't want anyone to feel in an uncomfortable situation. I like Barbara's example of how to work with that. But if there's actually threatening behavior, then we need to take care of that. So feel free to bring that to my attention if that happens. And also, here's my 2 cents on texting. I don't share my cell phone number with anybody that's a student. And we didn't do that at other institutions, you know, those were face to face. We had other ways for them to communicate with us. So now we have the Microsoft Teams, and I would encourage that because I certainly wouldn't want anybody texting me that late at night. I would not respond to that unless it's a coworker with an emergency, but not with students. So I think it's important to set healthy boundaries between yourself and the students.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And in the future, I will certainly bring that to your attention when these types of issues are happening in my classroom. Last term, it was actually wonderful. I just had lowercase i's all the time, but But and I think it's part of the reason because they're working on their mobile app and they're not really, as Glenda says, we have students that are really focusing on having their 4.0 versus actually learning the content in the class, regardless of what class they're taking. But I will say this, I still love working at Ottawa. And I think it was Barbara that mentioned, a teaching moment. One of the things that I've learned to do is I will change the subject title in my discussion so that I can put teachable moment for everyone, which really makes the discussion forum stick out when students go in and read. I also focus on teaching them to use the collapse button so that they can see when I'm posting questions. I'll change the subject line to a question that I pose to the whole class, or using, like Barbara said, that teachable moment, so that it sticks out instead of the, whatever, discussion one, whatever it may be, depending on the department that we're teaching in. And I've noticed a huge difference over the years when I started doing that I get a lot of responses to the questions. So in other words, students are jumping in instead of just posting their replies and moving on.
Okay. That was very, very interesting. Thank you for everything that you shared there, Lisa. The last thing on this slide, there is a website that you might want to take a look at, cybersmile.org, and they have 10 examples or situations pertaining to what is, poor netiquette. And I just picked one as opposed to lifting all 10 for you. And I'm glad I chose the one that I did, because based on what Lisa has told us, I think that we do have an issue. This is referring to the fact that not allowing others to express themselves. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. This can be bad netiquette. I have to say, I went back and visited some of my old course shells in preparation for this, and I found several different situations where students were disagreeing with a student colleague, but I read sort of how they started their post, and it said, "So, dear so-and-so, you're hello so-and-so, I respectfully disagree." So I am not necessarily seeing anything like this to the extent that Lisa is, but if you would like to get some additional information on this, cybersmile.org is a very interesting website. Karen, could you advance the slide, please? I think we might be up to the role of the instructor, which a couple of people have asked about. Garth, do you want to take this one?
Sure. The role of the instructor. I was thinking there are two categories of netiquette that we're discussing. One is what Lisa and some others had shared. Yes, students are using vulgar language to each other, and that's a problem. And yeah, it certainly is. The other more common kind of netiquette issues, I think, have to deal with students just not being very professional in how they present their post. As an instructor, since we're in a political time period now, and thank goodness the ads will soon stop running, right? But I see myself as sort of a campaign manager for each student. By that, I mean, I want to help them put their best foot forward and write in a way that impresses people in a positive way instead of a negative way. I see a lot of problems with grammar, phrases that are loosely linked together, garbled words. I push over and over for them to use spell check, and I encourage them to write at a sort of a 6th or 7th grade level. In other words, write short sentences, be distinctive, and for goodness sakes, go back and reread what you wrote so that we can try to make what we say very positive. I've got a new student this term in this week, and when she introduced herself, she said things like, Me and my boyfriend ate a good Mexican meal. I have ran a few half marathons. She wrote, she was going to do some trail runs, but instead of writing trail, she wrote trial, TRIAL runs. We see students butcher things like principal AL and principal LE and their THEYRE and their THEIR and that sort of thing. So I think it's important for us as instructors to try to get them to come around and make themselves look good. And do you have ideas on how to be successful? Because I have not achieved the success I would like to achieve with some of these students. Let's see what people are saying.
Karen, if you'd like to advance the slide, there's actually a second slide for the role of the instructor. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I try to explore, and you know, I'm gonna try to rein myself in since I'm part of English faculty, but you know, I really try hard to put in announcements or do a video and explain why, the why behind everything. Because as we know, at least with me, I teach mainly adult learners, although I'm seeing a lot more residential students in my online classes now. But I really try to stress the why of these things and why you need to be academic, why you need to write scholarly. And then I just hope for the best for the rest, you know, and sometimes I'm pretty forgiving on things. I really try to put clarity above everything else. And if they've done a well-written paper and it all makes sense and their organization is good, I try not to cream them on grammar, but I do a lot, well, and I do MLA, not APA, but I do a lot of feedback. Now, whether they read it, nothing drives me more nuts than when I see the same mistakes just week after week. I just want to just crawl up, but you know, you just do your best. And I try to, even if it's a small improvement, I figure that's a win.
I think you make a good point. And sometimes we have to meet students where they are, don't we? For some, English is a second or third language. And for some, they just didn't have enough positive educational experiences in high school. So I don't want to turn them off from expressing themselves. I know we're probably running short on time, but I had just this past term, I had a young guy, he's a traditional student who wrote in the management course, we're talking about leadership, and he said, my boss was an asshole. He got fired finally for embezzling money the day before his wedding. And then we were watching a video on Glenn Ross, the famous Alec Baldwin motivational speech. It has some vulgar language in it. And this guy wrote about that. And he said, yeah, you got to have a dog mentality. It was a good video. And you got to get your head out of your ass or get leave the organization. So I went back to him and I said part of it publicly and part of it privately. And privately, I said, here's some examples of how you might express yourself. Because what if you were talking to a group at a Bible study group, you might want not to express yourself that way. And so here's some things you might say. He came back to me and we struggled all term. He came back and said, hello, I just submitted my final paper. I worked very hard and I'm proud of the progress I made on my writing skills. I am proud of this paper because I pushed myself to finish. I am from the hood. I was homeless March through August, and now I am writing 1,600 word essays with proper grammar and have a roof over my head. And I have an opportunity to play baseball. I did this. Thanks for the semester and good luck in your future endeavors, Professor. Thanks for individually reaching out every week. I really appreciated that. So that made me feel good. And in his last email, when he said I'm using proper grammar, trust me, there were 17 or so places I could have gone back to him and said, my professor isn't spelled that way, grammar isn't spelled with an E, but I was really proud of the guy for sticking with the program and developing. So again, I think we need to meet people where they are and help them become the best they can become. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we remember like our Arizona students. Arizona's ranked like 48th or something in education. And so we do kind of need to meet them where they're at. A Kansas student is going to be much different from an Arizona student just because of the quality of education in high school. So.
Yeah, good point. Thank you.
Garth, did you want to say something very quickly about what's on this last slide, or what were you thinking?
You mean stick to the program?
No,
Yeah,
no, that's not what I meant.
I was thinking, as important as Netiquette is, as instructors, there's maybe some bigger issues for us to look at. I was really impressed by what John Lewis, the congressman, had to say about getting into good trouble. And we've seen things in the Kansas City area. There's a group that's put together to try to help homeless people find housing. And they went to a city council meeting not too long ago. It showed up on the 10 o'clock news. They raised a ruckus. You're supposed to go and talk politely and talk for 3 minutes and present your case and say, thank you very much for listening to us, and go back and sit down. These guys didn't get that message. They ranted and raved and talked about how unfair things were. Security had to ask them to leave the meeting. The question would be, if they had been polite and reasonable, would anything happen to support their cause? Because those guys on this and gals on the city council are going home to a warm bed and their daytime job. Public school teachers in Columbus, Ohio, and some other places were protesting the beginning of this school year about wages and working conditions. They are not being polite about it. Does polite always get us what we want? And finally, the example of in Texas and Florida with the two governors putting busloads of immigrants on planes and buses and sending them to Martha's Vineyard and to New York City. And that didn't go over very well. And I'm not necessarily promoting that kind of action, but at some point, would the guys in New York and Massachusetts have been open to saying, yeah, let's sit down and talk, Texas. We understand you're getting inundated with immigrants. Let us take some of those people off your hands. Just a question for all of us to think about. Should we be promoting students to think and become active and maybe get into whatever they define as good trouble is all I may be suggesting.
Okay, something to think about. I've got about 3 minutes after the hour. Does anybody have any final thoughts or any final story that you'd like to share? No,
Well,
are we
you
good?
guys. Thank you both. Thank you, Allison, and thank you, Garth. And thank you, Karen, for running the slides at the last minute. I appreciate that. So I did post the survey in the chat, and I will be sure to send the recording and the slides